start our interview with a few questions about you. So, where and when were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York, June 20th, 1930.
Okay. So talk to me about your family. So, what were your parents' occupations, and do you have any siblings?
My mother was a just a housewife. My father was a salesman. I had a brother who's passed away, and we grew up in New York, in a suburb called the Rockaways. This is a beach resort, very similar to Miami or Fort Lauderdale, the beaches, only it didn't have that kind of population. It was small little towns, and mostly in the summertime they had bungalows, rooming houses, and in the wintertime there were just a few people, maybe a few hundred or maybe 1,000 people in each area that were there. That's where I grew up from about 1939 to 1961 when I married a lovely lady.
So what were you doing before you entered the service?
Say that again?
What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was in sales. When I graduated high school, economics dictated that it was tough to go to college. So I became a salesman. My father was a salesman, and I was a salesman in New York for about 6 months selling embroidery. And I wasn't making much money in 1952, maybe $50, $60 a week, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't something that we needed in the home. So someone I knew got a hold of me one day, and he says, "Harvey, what are you doing?" I told him, he says, "Are you interested in making money?" Well, at that time, our family needed money. So I said, yes. And I said to him, what do you do? He says, "I sell Electrolux." And I don't know what Electrolux meant. I don't know if it was I don't know what it was. So I said, "Mel, what was it? What is it?" He says, "A vacuum cleaner." "A vacuum cleaner?" I said, "You sell vacuum cleaners?" He says, "Harvey, do you want to make a lot of money?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Come with me." Next Saturday, he picked me up. I didn't have a car. And we went to a meeting, and there was a bunch of men, and they were all excited to go out and make money. And he took me out, and they had a machine, a vacuum machine, and we started knocking on doors. And he just said, "Stay here and don't worry about anything." Finally, and this was, I must say this, I have memories of him. This is one of the greatest salesmen I ever knew. And finally he'd get inside, and then he'd take the machine inside and he'd do a demonstration. And after a while, the lady said, "Okay." All he'd do was take a piece of an application, "Hold on to this. I'll never forget this. Hold on to this. You're going to need it. You might want it." And during the demonstration, he says, "Why don't you make yourself happy, Mrs. Jones? Why don't you okay this?" And she's standing there, well, my husband, and I'll never forget, we were trained. They gave us a script, things, when stuff that people would say to overcome that, objections. This is 1952. I haven't told this story since that time, and it comes back. But he says, "Madam," he says, "I appreciate that, but who does the cleaning in your house?" And she says, "Well, I do." "Well, I'm sure that Mr. Jones, when he comes home and sees this great cleaner, he'd be happy you'd have something to do." That was the spiel, if you want to call it that. That was the way you got into them to sign. Make yourself happy again. Why don't you sign this? After 37 times, she signed it. We got out, and I remember this distinctly like it was yesterday. He says, "Harvey, do you know how much we made on that?" I said, "No." The machine at that time was about $70. This is 52. And no, 51. And he say, "We made a certain amount of dollars." I did $30 or $40 just for that amount. That was half my pay for a week. So he says, "Let's go." And he kept on knocking on doors, got into another one. And the same thing, closed, and learned certain things in sales that carried me to this day, because I've been a salesman, is to qualify a customer and to find out. And there's 3 main things that I've learned in life in the sales program is show the need, create the desire, and close. And if you remember that in any kind of sales, those three things will be the root of what you're going to accomplish. Show the need, create the desire, and then you can close on that sale. That's my selling tip for the day.
Now we would like to know a little bit more about your military service. So did you enlist or were you drafted? And if you enlisted, why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
I didn't enlist. I was drafted in October 1951 with about 6 or 7 fellows from my area. We all went to school together. And we went to New York, went over to New Jersey, and then for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we were shipped to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That's in Lawton, Oklahoma, where I was that was the Field Artillery Replacement Center, the largest one in the country. And we studied there. We had basic training there. It was about 16 weeks. 8 weeks was of physical training and some studies. The other 8 weeks, I learned surveying, and so what surveying does. And we were trained to be a surveyor. We had about 2 or 3 weeks off, and then went home, and then we went on a plane and went to California, Camp Stoneham, I think. I'm not sure, and we stayed there in a repo depot, and then we sailed for 14 days on the Pacific and saw Mount Hiroshima, landed in Japan, processed there, and about a week later shipped off to the hills of Korea. I can't give you the address because there was no address.
Can you tell us more about your wife, or did you stay in contact with her while you were in Korea?
I didn't have a wife, I had a girlfriend. I wrote to her 4 or 5 times a week, and that's the only way you could contact anybody there, was by mail. Mm-hmm. So you had mail call, and that was a traditional, exciting thing once a day. They'd come over from Service Battery in a big truck and give out the mail. So that was the contact. There was no such thing as a phone to go back home.
Did you feel that the training you received prepared you for your duties in the military?
Say that again?
Did you feel that the training you received prepared you for your daily duties in the military?
Yes. They trained us on surveying, and when I got into this artillery outfit, it was an 8-inch howitzer, which was the largest gun at the time in Korea, and we were pretty close. In fact, our outfit was the closest one to the front line, which was only about 1.5 miles. That might seem a lot, but it's not. When you could hear the enemy, and at that time the North Koreans would blow bugles, and you used to hear that. And we fired upon the enemy. And I was attached to, I was with the 17th Field Artillery Battalion, Battery B. And we had 4 guns, 4 8-inch howitzers. 3 were positioned into the ground, 1 was on a mobile, like a tank. And that went into areas on missions. But we would have what they call a fire mission. And we would fire upon the enemy. And that was one of the duties that I had. There was about 9 to 11 men needed to create a fire mission. The different jobs that they would do to pick up the ammunition, do some coordinates with a microscope, one of my jobs was to elevate the tube. And you get instructions from a fellow who's getting the instructions from the Fire Direction Command. And the fire mission would continue. And we'd shoot this 200-pound shell, clean the breech, and then we wait for the next command. Fire again. They'd maybe change the direction when the forward observer sees that maybe it was 100 yards short, left or right. They would get that command back. Fire Direction Command would make the adjustment, phone it in. One of the things I did was on the phone for a while. We all switched position, and I'd repeat it to the gunner and the quadrant man. So he would do the instruments, line it up on aiming circles, elevate it to the right thing. They'd get a group of people putting in the shell, then a group of people putting in the powder, This is 1952. I haven't told this story, maybe once or twice before, but it's coming back. And it was a coordinated effort of about 9 to 10 people to get this 200-pound projectile going. And then you stood by waiting for the command to fire. And what happened is there was a firing mechanism that had a blank cartridge. Put it in there, went into the breech that had a center hole in it. When he fired, it fired the explosive, touched the back of the pad, and the shell would go off. And it went off.
So how did you adapt to military life? Like including like, the physical regimen, barracks, and then food and social life?
Well, first, there was no social life. I mean, I had a girlfriend back home. I didn't have time. I was in as I said, Fort Sill. We had some time off, but maybe we play pool in the, or do something. We went to Oklahoma City over a weekend if we had the pass, and we just look around as tourists. At 21, 22, there was, there wasn't a lot, but we managed. We enjoyed it. We adapted to the life of a soldier going through training.
Mm-hmm. Are you still in contact with any of your friends from the military, or?
Three. They came from our. Well, when I got out of service, I was in contact with one fellow in Ohio, who after a few years ago, we used to call on the phone because we were good in boot. We were very close in training. His name was Lou Tomorrow, can't forget it, and he passed away. So the only ones I have are the friends that went with me into basic training, and 2 or 3 of those passed on. So there's really only one that I know who lives close by where I live here in Florida. When he comes down from New York, he has a vacation spot very close to where I am, and we get together. We spend a couple of weeks together, and we're on the phone once a week, and those are my contacts.
Do you have any more memories of your experience in Korea?
A lot. Well, let me give you let me try and draw a picture I think is interesting. You're 22 years of age, and you're in a war zone. You're shelling the enemy, and you're getting shelled. And at that time, at 21 or 22, there's things that you would do then that you would never do before. And one of them was in the front of this big hill that we fired over was a British outfit. And I wasn't a big drinker at that time, but I tried a beer once in a blue moon. And when we fired over a field about 80 or 90 yards. And then there was the mountain going over. In that field, we didn't know what was there. It was barbed wire, but we didn't know what was there. It could have been mines, it could have been something. And one day, one of the fellows say, "Hey, Harvey, come on, we're going over to see the Brits, and we're gonna get some beer. We need someone to get the beer back." Okay, So, but how did I get there? We had to go over into this field, and we crawled and crawled and crawled. Wires are over our head, and finally we went up the mountain. We got a couple of cases of beer and hiked them down this mountain across. Now we brought it across this possible minefield. Now, if anybody told me that I did that, I would say no, because you'd have to be crazy. But at 21 and 22, and you're in the service, you do things that you wouldn't do normally.
I'm sorry. Sir, can you please try not to sway with the chair?
Okay.
Because in the shot, like it looks, you're kind of like rotating. So I'd prefer if you just kind of chose one spot.
No
stay
problem
there.
at all.
Just it would look better. So.
No problem.
Also, I might need to make a quick phone call. So. Sorry. Anything else?
Are we taking a break?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Like how they like treating them? Okay. All right.
No.
All right. You good? I was where the station. Okay. Okay. so that we can stay on track. That's really funny though. I mean,
There's other stories, but that one comes to mind because I'm dealing with youth. I'm looking at you young fellas, and I'm just trying to put myself into that mode. But those are the things I did. But when I tell that story about crawling over a possible minefield, going up for beer, which I didn't really care for, then coming back, was just I thought a humorous,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
So what did some of your friends think after you had come back with the case of beer?
It was a hero. We're a hero for the night. That's what we're a hero for the night. There were 3 or 4 of us. We brought these cases of beer back, and everyone went for beer. I think I had one, and that was it. I wasn't a beer drinker.
Did some of your other friends have other stories of like were people regularly trying to like be the hero for the day, or was that just one?
No, that wasn't a heroic. That wasn't a heroic thing. Heroic things were a few other things that came about, but that wasn't a heroic thing. That what we did. It was in fact. I got reprimanded on that for doing that. The captain found out, and one stripe came off, and from sergeant came a corporal, and that was that. That was brief.
Did you know where Korea was or anything about Korea before the war began?
We had an indoctrination period. We knew it was right near Japan because we sailed from Japan to Korea, which wasn't far. We didn't know. Let's see, 1951, the United States entered the Korean. It's not a war. It was a conflict. It was a police action. Congress didn't, I think, act on this. It was a police action. It wasn't a war, just repeat that once more. I'll appreciate it.
And then, well, I think you answered the question. So, like, what were the weather conditions like?
In Korea?
Yeah.
Well, most people thought of Korea as bitter cold, and it was bitter cold. And we had special army boots that were called Mickey Mouse boots. They were thermal boots, and so when you stood a long time with them and your feet perspire, these had like a ventilator, so when you walked, there would be air ventilating out of your toes and your heels. We call them Mickey Mouse boots. The conditions, most people saw Korean veterans firing, etc., in the news, bundled up. It was cold. What they didn't know was that the heat was unbearable in the summertime, and they didn't show that. But we dug our, instead of a tent for a long time, we dug into the mountain, and we sandbagged the sides of the mountain, and we went in and slept there because it was cool inside. So the conditions there were such. It was very, very hot in the summer, especially if you're on a fire mission and now you're firing away, taking a shell, sitting there in the sun, doing all that kind of operation. But when it was cold, it was cold. I mean, you had warmth. We had enough clothes. We had enough things. Our tent we had about 12 people in a tent. In our tent, you had a stove there, and every couple of hours, someone else would go on duty, make sure that any fire come along. They'd patrol. They'd have it they'd stand duty on that for about 2 hours. So we had shifts doing that. But go ahead. The cold was noticeable, but the heat was also bad.
So then, well, besides the sides of the mountains, where else did you stay, or did you sleep overnight? So
We had tents.
Mhm.
We had tents in the hills that were up on the side of a hill, tent here, tent there. various. There were about 8 or 9 in a tent. There was quite a few tents because there were three guns. So each one had a tent there. Then you had a service battery. Then you had headquarters battery, where the captain was with his staff. So you had several tents in the compound.
Did you have any interactions with civilians?
No,
Okay.
no. The only interaction we had with the civilians. You're talking about with the Koreans.
Yes.
We had a great boy who took care of our clothes. He did his washing. He did things like that, prepare, to do that. So we almost had a maid, okay? But no, we didn't have any interaction with any civilians at all. We were in a fighting zone. They wouldn't even let civilians there. It was in the mountains. I couldn't tell you the city because I don't think it was a city there. It was just mountains.
Did you have any moment where you felt like you were in grave danger? Or?
Yeah. Several times, once or twice a month, we'd get shelled. So that was danger. Once in a while, I would serve duty at a gun post. And we dug in on the top of a mountain. We protected we didn't know what was happening. I mean, the enemy was only a mile and a half away. So we didn't know if any of them filtered in. So that was the reason for the guard posts. So we never had an incident where anybody came in that way that was done. So we didn't have an incident that, thank God, that was detrimental to our outfit.
Besides surveying, did you have any other duties while serving?
I was on the gun. Surveying was done primarily when we have to move. In other words, we'd pack up and we'd go to another area, and we had to find out the coordinates of that area. So I had a crew of 4, and what we did was we started on the top of a mountain where they would you'd find with the telescopes and all another mountain with an aiming stick, and you'd line onto that, and now through triangulation and triangulation, we would know where we're going. And then when we got there, we would now know the coordinates where this battery is now that we moved to. Then that's on the map. Now Fire Direction Command knows where they are on the map, so they can now fire on the enemy once they know the position that they're in when the fire direction man told them. What I did do, I don't know if I mentioned this, but so to get an extra point, one of the things I did was volunteer. You don't volunteer in the Army, but I volunteered. So I volunteered to be with a forward observer. So for 3 days, we were on top of a mountain looking over the enemy. And we saw the enemy, and he would bring fire upon the enemy. The lieutenant, whose name escapes me, but the lieutenant would create a fire mission. And one of the things I did was call back the fire mission. And he'd give me the instructions, the coordinates and things like that. It would be radioed back to my outfit, and they would assign certain guns, different angles to shoot, and that's how that went on.
Can you explain the point system a little bit further, please?
The points?
The point system, yes.
Point system was, well, if you're on the front lines of the infantry, you got 4 points. So it was 39 points to rotate. I was in the one right behind it was 3, and then there's one way back was 2. I don't think there was a 1. 1 was maybe back in Seoul, just being a soldier in a city that had no conflict at all. They supplied us with all the things, ammunition, they supplied us with food, they supplied us with the rations, things like that.
Was there anything important to you that you carried with you during your time?
When you say carried, you mean is mentally?
Or anything, any sort of anything in your bag, in your pocket, anything like?
No. I had a locker under my cot, with my personal belongings, shaving creams, this and that, change of clothes. That's where the civilian, this young boy came. He would do your laundry. You leave it on your cot. He would pick it up, and then we'd have a fresh set of clothes.
Where were you when the conflict ended?
When the conflict ended, which was in June, I believe in 1953, I was on the high seas. I was on a boat, a ship, going back to the United States. My time, my 39 points came, and in fact I had 40 points, and I stayed there probably about 3 weeks longer than I felt I should have. But I was on the high seas when the declaration was signed. It was, I don't know the exact date, should know, but it was in June. I was on a ship heading home to California, then a couple of days processing there, and back home.
How was your journey back home?
Journey back home? Journey back home was fine. Couldn't wait to get back. Anxiety, girlfriend, my parents, my brother. It was over with. And when you look back, when I look back, I'm looking back as a matured man who's getting on in age. And when you're 21, 22, you're getting back is a whole different ball game. It's a different feeling. So you can reflect back and think of it, and then you could also think of what I thought about then. I wanted to get home. I wanted to see my girlfriend. I wanted to see my parents. I didn't know what I was going to do. Am I going to go back to vacuum cleaners? Am I going to go back to school? I went back to school. I studied something for a while. That was, remember, this is 1952, 53. The world has changed. The education system has changed. Everything has changed. We're in a new technology now, which we weren't in at that time.
You mentioned something in your mind to help you endure while you were in Korea. Can you please tell us about that?
You hope you weren't. You hope that when we get shelled, the shell didn't come to you. That's number one. We didn't get shelled that much. We got shelled a few times a month, maybe once, twice a month. So we were. But you hear they came out. I had an incident. We were on a mission, and shells came in. One of them exploded fairly close. Thank God I had no shrapnel. I was thrown off the tail, and I hurt myself. And they took me back to the compound and the hospital there, and they didn't see anything broken. I remember the fellow said, "Hey, pray for a break, because if you get a break, you go home." But no such luck. All right, but that's what I can remember there.
So back to your going home. How were you received by your friend's family and then girlfriend?
Oh, it was very nice. Well, funny story. I don't know how many people know New York. I don't know how many people, but after we were in Jersey, being reprocessed and going, I got a bus into Times Square, which is a famous place in Manhattan, and my girlfriend was driven there to meet me. So my first emotional thing was when I saw my girlfriend. We met in Times Square, and hugged and kissed and things like that. My friends were in a car, and they drove us back. It was about 45 minutes to the Rockaways. Saw my mother, typical home, it wasn't balloons and everything, crying and normal emotions that go, and that was my coming home.
How was the process of readjusting to civilian life? What was most difficult for you?
It wasn't very difficult. It wasn't that I carried these memories with me and they affected me to the point where I couldn't socialize or I couldn't do anything. I thought I had a girlfriend. I had my parents. I had my brother. I wanted to be, television was just in its infancy, and I wanted to be a cameraman. And I went to a school in New York called, it's amazing, SRT, School of Radio and Television. And I wanted to be, it had two things, either production or the camera. And I started to go with the camera, and then suddenly they switched around, and then you did some producing work and directing. And I fell in love with that, behind the camera directing, and I liked that for a while. And I was a salesman I was a salesman at that time for several months, almost a year, selling embroidery in Manhattan in the garment district. One of the men said, "Would you like a job from the school?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And it was with a production company at that time. So I was all excited. So I got a job with the production company. I was what they call a gopher. Do you know what a gopher is? Go for this, go for that. But I learned, I was with a film director, and this is what I loved for a while. But it was going nowhere. In 1955, television came to California. California is when television really broke out, and New York lost a lot of people, and I didn't pursue it. I didn't go to California. I was single, and I just went back into sales, and that's how that came about.
After the Korean conflict, what's your opinion of or participating in it?
My opinion on what?
On participating in the Korean conflict.
What was my opinion on the
Yeah.
my opinion?
I'm sorry.
My opinion on the Korean. When you went into the service, you were given history of the United States. This is taking people away from their normal way of life and indoctrinating them into the service. And therefore, you have to get some kind of a feeling that the Army wants you to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to be able to really do something, because you're going to question all these things. So the conflict at that time was North Korea invaded South Korea, came over the 39th, and the United States is protecting not only that country, but its duty to stand up for what's right. That's how we entered the war. I mean, they didn't declare war on us. We were a police action. So that's. But the adjustment just came along. I have memories of it, but I don't think of it too often. When something I see now in today's area, we have North Korea again, so as to we stand today. So how do I look at it from then and now? You get into politics, which I don't want to get into, because it's really a political thing, all of what's happening today. So what will prevail will prevail. Hopefully it will work out well. Trying to be neutral in that.
Are there any life lessons you learned from military service?
Don't volunteer. Life lessons. Life is precious. Life is very precious, because at times we could have gotten killed, but at 21, 22, you don't think it as much. But I think about it now when some situation comes about. I was there, and I could have gotten killed, and that's a thing. But what makes me feel not corny. I was there when the country needed me, and that was very good to me. It keeps me going. It's very sentimental to me that the country needed me, and thousands of us answered that call. That's the most important thing.
What message would you like to leave for anyone who will view this interview at any point?
Well, first of all, I'm highly flattered doing this. I hope it reaches some kind of benefit to somebody, whatever your goal might be, and get an idea that that this is the greatest country there is. To serve and to stand up for this country is an honor. And that's the most important thing I think young people today should know, that they're living in a country at a time when they should be the proudest there is. A lot of politics come into this, and that's not my expertise in the political arena there. I don't know if I answered that the way you wanted
No,
it.
you did, absolutely. So if you had, or would you do it again? Would you serve for the U.S. if you could?
I would serve in the U.S. some way. I would serve my country, certainly not as a soldier, because I don't think it would be I would be up to that. But somewhere in the, I would probably volunteer in some area that would be beneficial in the country's need.
Would you support the unification of North and South Korea?
Would I support unification of North and South Korea? Well, I don't. Again, here we are in politics, because I don't know how much North Korea can be unified. We're fighting them now, so it's up to the powers to be. Right now, it's the President of the United States who's the most will be the most influential person to see what happens, and hopefully he calls, or Congress calls, or whatever who's going to call it, makes the right decisions. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Have you returned to Korea since?
No,
Okay.
no.
Would you be interested in returning, or?
If I have a feeling I'd like to try and go back to Japan with my wife as a tourist, everything, and I'd probably be interested in seeing Seoul, which is the capital of Korea, which is probably a metropolis at this time, rather than when you saw it, you saw huts. You saw a few buildings, but you saw huts. When as a projection, one of the jobs I had I was a projectionist, movie projectionist. When we need, so I would get a Jeep. They would take me to a place where I'd pick up the film, come back, put on the film, and for nighttime, 3 or 4 nights a week, show film. So I don't know where this is leading to. I just lost my train of thought. But I did some other things than just that. But I forgot the question, to be honest with you.
You answered it. I asked if you would be interested in returning. You said you'd want to see Seoul with your wife.
Probably if I got to Japan, I would go to Korea and go to Seoul just to see it. I couldn't see where I was because I didn't know where I was. I have no idea where I was. I wasn't in a city. Or if it was a city, it was a 22-letter thing, Hamjangyu, whatever it would be. It was in the hills. So I spent almost 13 months in the hills. We did have what they call R&R, which is rest and recuperation. And when you get a certain amount of time in, you go to Japan for a week. So you have recreation. And that was that. I went once. I was eligible a second time, but I had a conflict there with the sergeant, and I'm still brooding. No, I'm not brooding over it now, but I could have gone the second time. That was an escape from where you were.
Is there anything else that we have not talked about that you'd like to add to this interview?
I'm flattered, again, honored. The only thing I can repeat is that we were there when the country needed us. To me, that's a very, very, very important thing. And hopefully, I'm addressing some young fellas here. Not that I hope you don't have to, but that's depending on what the world situation is. But it's an experience. It's a learning experience of meeting a lot of different other people from different parts of the states, different creeds, different colors, different religions, all being mixed up into a barrel, and how you get along. People don't know your customs. Even though they're Americans, they don't know what your heritage is, where'd you come from, what you believe in, religion. There's a multitude of things that enter into all of this. So I can't pin out one particular thing.
And then what can you say about the legacy of Korean War veterans?
The legacy that we left is we served our country. Again, it comes back to that thing. We served our country when they needed us. And that, to me, I've said it 3 or 4 times, and I don't want to be redundant, but that is, I think, the essence of who we are, who this country is. We were there, and it was something. It was a duty. It was an honor. It was all these things wrapped up in one.
Right. Well, once again, thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. That concludes our interview. I'd like to thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
It was really enjoyable. I thank you all. Really, really thank you for having me.